Welcome back to the podcast. I've already missed my 9 a.m. deadline going into week number 2 of being back on this podcast, so I apologize. But hopefully, you're still listening to this on Monday. And we just got back from Japan. That's kind of why I guess I didn't really have my life together last week. It's been I've been doing daily videos over on Patreon, patreon.com/Taylor Jackson for the Book More Weddings 2020 course. So there's been a lot of stuff going on over there. And then we've also been making a lot of content for a series of projects, actually. One really big landscape travel photography tutorial that's going to be for free on YouTube, and it's going to be pretty insane. We shot a lot more content than I was expecting to shoot on this trip. And then we're also doing a new travel series that will be out probably March, April, May. It's a bit challenging, I guess, for me to be filming like usually as a YouTube person, whatever I'm shooting today, like I want to be releasing that tomorrow at 8 a.m. style. And it's a little bit different for me to be creating content with such a long view. It's also a little discouraging because all my effort that I'm putting into things is not being seen at all. And I really have nothing to put on YouTube right now because all of my time is dedicated to that project, but it's going to be awesome. So I'm excited for that. Hopefully you're excited for that. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be definitely the best content that I've ever made. So excited to do that. Excited for some new brand partnerships as well that will be unveiled hopefully over the next couple of weeks, maybe into the new year. Today, I am here to talk to you about something that we've been using for a little bit now, the Nikon Z Mirrorless series. And when the Z series was originally released, it was I don't think it was the greatest product release of all time. I think that it kind of came at a time when the Canon R was just out, and I think the Fuji X-T3 dropped just like randomly and surprisingly, and a bunch of other, like, everything was kind of happening in the industry at that time. It was kind of cool that there was just all of a sudden all these new products, and I feel like Nikon had the slowest start to all of those products. I am a Nikon shooter, primarily a Nikon D850 right now for weddings. But with the rumors and the, I guess, not necessarily even rumors, the fact that they are building a D6, if that D6 ends up essentially having in-body stabilization and I can use all my regular lenses that I would use and I can now shoot video that's stabilized with them, I'm more than likely going to be picking up that camera to make my main wedding camera. And I don't really care the fact that it's bigger. It's not that big of a deal for me. I used a Nikon D5 for a long, long time. And with a 7200, it's big, but I don't know. I'm out there to take the best wedding photos possible. And I don't mind going home with sore arms for the first couple weeks. It's kind of the warm up period where the first maybe one or two weddings of the year, when you go out with like the full size pro body with like heavy lenses, you get home and your arms are actually sore, and then after that you kind of adapt to it, I guess. So that's another benefit, I guess, to shooting lots of weddings and continuing with volume, which is something that we're getting into a lot over in the Book More Weddings course. So head over there if you're interested. Nikon Z series, we have, I think, pretty much every lens for it now. We've been slowly collecting them, and we have 3 bodies, so we're shooting a lot of content on them now, video content. And that was one of the criticisms in the beginning, was just that the fact that the autofocus wasn't really that great. But I think with the recent updates to the firmware, it's been pretty good. The reason specifically that I like the Nikon Mirrorless series is, one, like, they actually feel good to shoot. So that's been one of my, not necessarily criticisms, but one of the reasons that Sony wasn't really something that I wanted to be using at a 10-hour, 12-hour wedding day. I know you can absolutely use it. It would have been an interesting time. So I think to kind of speak to why I believe that Sony has really exploded in the scene, and according to some reports, actually has dethroned Nikon as like the number 2 camera manufacturer in, I guess, the world, maybe Japan. I feel like all those news articles are just there to get clicks and are all a little bit misleading. The thing that I think kind of really helped Sony is that when they started releasing cameras, they were very technology, very spec heavy, and they were progressing in a way that no other camera company was. What they weren't doing at the original time, that they are doing now with the A7R4, is that the ergonomics and how you actually handle the camera wasn't really great. But because of the fact that everything was kind of moving out of local camera shops and actually into Amazon and into like digital stores around the world, you were more comparing on specs whenever you were buying cameras. And I feel like that is where Sony kind of really realized the potential of it and really started to sell a lot of cameras that way when you couldn't go in and you couldn't physically touch it. Because if you, one of the original Sony cameras, if you went in and you compared that against a Nikon, even a D750 or something like that, you would likely, by a lot, probably prefer the Nikon D750. But because we're just kind of comparing on specs and like this does so much more than this camera does, that a lot of Sony cameras started to sell. So I think that's one of the reasons for the initial traction of the company. And they really are a fantastic company overall as well. They seem to be creating a community that's unlike anything else that's happening in photography. Their artisan program and collective, and the way that they put events together is actually really, really cool. So I have nothing but respect for Sony. For cameras and for what I actually use, though, I prefer using Nikon products, one for just the general feeling of using it, as well as the kind of in-body look and feel that come out of all of the images and the photos. I maybe don't necessarily need a Nikon body, but I think that using Nikon lenses and the Nikkor lenses really does kind of step up my game as a photographer, and it creates something that's a little bit more artistic almost. I see this very strongly in the lenses that I use on a wedding day, the 85 1.4G and the 35 1.4G and the 24. And using all of those lenses, they create something that doesn't really exist with other lenses. And that's a huge reason why I've been part of the Nikon ecosystem for so long, is that I've used the 58 as well, the 58 1.4, which is also a fantastic lens. I've spoken to this in other videos that I'm a little bit more quiet, a little bit more introverted, and I find myself more comfortable on the 85. Manny Ortiz and I were hanging out in Japan, and he calls it the introvert lens because it's, I don't know, the way that you can, it looks like you're nice and close, but you're actually a little bit further away, but you don't have the compression and the actual appearance of physical separation like you might get with a 7200. So that's kind of why he calls it the introvert lens, and I feel like I'm the most comfortable on that. I also feel like it creates a great depth of field, like that contrast between the subject and everything else that's going on. So on a wedding day specifically, it is something that I'm pretty excited to be able to almost abuse at some points if I walk into like a getting ready space, or if I walk into a messy hall or something, that I'm able to kind of just blur away everything in the background. This also goes for first dances, that if I can make everybody in the background not really in focus and just a couple in focus, I feel like you get a lot more frames that are usable, because there's always that one person looking in the wrong way or blinking or whatever it is that's distracting from the scene. So that's a reason that I shoot on primes, is so that I have complete control over my depth of field at all moments. And the reason that I use Nikon primes, specifically those ones for digital SLR, are primarily because of just the feeling that those images create. And now that I'm shooting a lot of video, and I feel like the industry really is seeing kind of a hard shift, or at least a shift into the hybrid coverage. And I feel like if you're getting into photography right now, if you're trying to be a wedding photographer, I would say make sure you get your video skills up to professional standards. And I feel like professional standards in weddings is a pretty easy thing that you can achieve over a year. That if you just go out right now and you're like, I've never shot a video, how do I do this? And you just go out today and you shoot a video on whatever you're doing, or a community event tonight, or you go skating, or just building content and just starting right now and making that 1 or 2 minute video to at least get yourself familiar with editing and familiar with Premiere or Final Cut, whatever you use. I personally use Premiere, but just getting in and just creating and learning to tell stories in new ways really does help you, I think, a lot. The other huge benefit is something we talk about in the Book More Weddings course that's going up on Patreon right now, is specifically the fact, actually it's this week is this topic, just creating content for yourself, for your brand. And the way that a lot of people are not going to be standing out in 2020 is by not doing this, and by not slowly becoming comfortable in front of a camera or in front of audio, kind of like this podcast. Like, you can easily make a behind the scenes video that you do a voiceover, that you explain your process, why somebody should book you. And if you have a very strong vision on what you think a wedding day should look like, and you're able to convey that to people, you can really connect with them on a core level and actually make those bookings. But it is scary because you're putting your vision out there, and if it doesn't connect, you're not going to make that booking at all. You're going to make them run away even further. But if you are connecting with that core group, your ideal couple and audience, you're going to do a lot of really good things for your business, as far as just numbers go, and as far as also attracting your ideal client. And this all leads back into why I actually haven't been really enjoying the Nikon Z series. We've been shooting with Z6s with the primes, the Nikon primes that are actually for the Z series cameras. And one, they're technically great. Like they're top of the game for being a 1.8 lens. Like everything is just amazing. The thing that I like the most is now that video autofocus is not really something that Nikon had prior to this. You could technically use it, but I would never have used it in a professional setting. And now the way that their autofocus system works, it is actually really, really good. So there have been a few hiccups. Like this is Nikon's first real kind of mirrorless release, so it didn't come out of the box exactly perfect, but it's getting there slowly over time. And from what I've heard or what I've read online, there's another firmware update coming potentially next week, probably to update one for the CF Express cards that are now starting to be released, and maybe some more kind of autofocus fine tweaks. But I'm super happy with it now. Manny, speaking of Manny, he uploaded a video of his experience with the Z6 and the fact that he loves the Nikon mirrorless series, but the autofocus was kind of, it was fluctuating heavily for him and it wasn't really working out that well a lot of the time. And my, I guess, like kind of workaround for that is whenever the camera starts doing something that you don't want to do, that you can hopefully quickly override that by the touch screen. And when I'm shooting video, it's rarely in kind of those once in a lifetime moments. If I'm running autofocus, if I'm on manual focus, then it probably is one of those moments, which is something that I would still really prefer to do, I guess, overall, is to make sure that I have everything locked off and perfect as far as settings go. This goes for first kisses and all kinds of things that happen just kind of that one time. And I'll do this for photos that when I'm waiting for a first kiss to happen, I will just like have my autofocus point set and I will just have it locked. I use my back button not as a back button focus, but the opposite. So that's the one time that I'll just kind of like hold on that button and make sure that everything's in focus. So I think once in a lifetime moments, it's important not to let your camera just at the last second decide that it wants to do something else. But it's pretty quick to override for the most part. So my other feedback, I guess, on the Nikon Z series is that they've released, it came out, I guess, last year. So none of this should be new information to you, but I think it is important to do a little bit of an update, I guess, of the system because it has progressed. The 24 to 70 2.8, which is a very expensive lens, is potentially, I would say, the best lens that Nikon has ever made in a 24 to 70 range. I've spoken to it on YouTube before that I do not like a 24 to 70 for wedding photography coverage specifically, but what I do like it for is out traveling the world. And again, while it is a little bit heavy, the quality that comes off of it, it feels like you're shooting just a lot of primes, and the way that it puts the colors and the contrast and everything together feels really, really good. The for photos, like you kind of have full ability to retouch everything and you can change tones and you can make it as perfect as you want. But the, I guess, the main benefit for me is that when I'm shooting video frames, I shoot everything as I want it in the camera. I'm not shooting en log format or anything like that. So when I shoot it and I want it to be exactly correct in camera, all of those little nuances that come out in all the Nikkor, like the good lenses, really do create something that's a lot more special than if I was shooting it really with anything else. And then the other cool thing is that I can use all my lenses, then they're now stabilized. So the 85 1.4G that I talked about earlier, the 35 and the 24, I can put those all on and have a stabilized body. So for now, it is my travel kit and what we're creating pretty much all of our video content on, and I am super, super happy with it. In the future, I don't know what's going to happen. I have no visibility on that, but if the Nikon D6 does come out and I'm able to just like use that with in-body stabilization, I do personally prefer a digital SLR on a wedding day. I like to be able to look through a viewfinder. I find that it's an easier experience for me overall, and I feel like I'm not losing anything necessarily by not being on kind of mirrorless for weddings yet. So something to think about. Sorry if it just kind of confuses your buying whatever you thought you were going to buy in the future. But there really is no wrong answers. I feel like that's another reason why in general, like I guess camera sales are kind of down across the board. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it's just the fact that 5 years ago, if a camera company released a camera, it's probably still good enough today. So you don't have to be looking for the newest, latest, greatest. That something like a Nikon D750 is still a very, very good camera. And even if it does get refreshed this year, it's still a good camera. So that's probably why camera sales are down overall, which is kind of, I guess, the positive is the fact that they've just made good cameras that will be good enough and will stand the test of time now. So there's not a huge reason to upgrade. So hopefully you can kind of curb your gear list a little bit. But if you are looking at the Nikon Z series, it's what we're using now for pretty much all of our video content as well as travel photo content. So you'll see a lot more of that rolling out over the next couple of months. But yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the podcast. Book More Weddings 2020 going up Patreon all this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. There'll be a new video up, and then a few more over the rest of the month. Taking some time off for Christmas and kind of New Year's and whatnot. And then January, we actually go back to Japan. We're calling it Japanuary. And we'll be there for a week, and then we're doing a lot of stuff. So I get to travel, fortunately, for most of it, which is cool. So Lindsay's coming, and I don't know, everybody's kind of coming to Japan this time. So should be fun. Should be interesting to go to such a quiet city like Tokyo with a big group of people that are not from Japan. We'll see how that all works out, but I'm happy to be heading back there so soon, considering I just got home on Saturday night. So thanks for listening to the podcast. I will see you again next Monday, or you'll listen again, I guess, if you want. I hope you listen again. See you next week.